A shocking new 2024 election poll from the New York Times shows Donald Trump destroying Kamala Harris in three key battleground states. Today, we're going to be taking a look at this new data from the Sun Belt, as well as the 2024 electoral map if Trump continues to dominate down south. And so starting off with this new New York Times and Siena College poll, which was conducted from September 17th to the 21st, so well after the debate, they decided to poll three states: Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina. All three of them are incredibly competitive, and they could very well decide the outcome of this election. In Arizona, Trump has the largest lead, where he's at 50% to Kamala Harris's 45%. Now, what you have to keep in mind is that this is not even a state that Trump won in the last election. In fact, Joe Biden KO'd Arizona by 0.31% in 2020. Today, Kamala Harris, the new Democratic nominee, she isn't even close to leading in this state. If she loses Arizona by 5%, the election is over. Kamala Harris has absolutely no chance if she wins just 45% of the vote in one of the key swing states. She is also at 45% in Georgia, which is especially concerning as this is another state that Biden won in the last election by 0.24%. This is a state the Democrats didn't win since 1992, so it's not too surprising that Trump is on track to win it back, but Kamala Harris losing by 4%, that is a 4-point drop for the Democratic Party. If the entire country shifts 4 points to the right, there's no way that Trump is not going to be reelected. And so Georgia's electorate is especially competitive. They have 2 Democratic senators, but they do have a Republican governor, and so a poor performance for Harris there could spell trouble for her basically everywhere else. And then finally, in the Tar Heel state of North Carolina, Trump has the smallest lead here, 49-47. Now, in 2020, Trump did actually win North Carolina. This is the only state that Trump won in both 2020 and 2016 in terms of the swing states, and so him being ahead is not too surprising. The race is going to be slightly more competitive because of Mark Robinson's disastrous governor campaign. However, the presidential race is significantly more important. It's not going to be decided by a gubernatorial election. Trump is still the clear favorite there, and what makes this even more significant is that the New York Times is an extremely left-leaning pollster that almost always overestimates Democratic support. And so we'll now be taking a look at the New York Times' polling from 2020 just to show you guys how inaccurate they've been in overestimating Democrats. In Arizona, Biden was supposed to win by 6 points 4 years ago against Trump, and yes, the New York Times did get the winner correct. Trump did win Arizona in the very end, but he did not win it by 6%. He won it by 0.31. This means that polling in the state from the New York Times overestimated the Democrats by nearly 6 points. And today, Trump leads in the state by 5%, according to that very same pollster, which really goes to show you just how much better Trump is doing in 2024 than he was against Biden in 2020. Next up in Georgia, this was the only state that was even remotely competitive for the New York Times from 2020, especially out of the swing states. Polling in Georgia does tend to be more accurate than in many other places. According to the final New York Times poll, Biden and Trump were in dead even heat. And looking at the polling average, Biden led by 1.2%, really not too far off from his eventual 0.24% victory. And so in Georgia, we're going to cut the New York Times some slack, but still today, Trump leads 49-45. They got it right in 2020, and if they get it right again, Donald Trump is going to win the Peach State by a whopping 4-point margin. This would basically guarantee a victory for the former president. And then in North Carolina, Donald Trump was supposed to lose by 3%. Basically, every single pollster said that Trump was going to lose the Tar Heel state 4 years ago. The polling had Biden leading by 1.8%, and he led throughout the entirety of the election cycle 4 years ago. The New York Times had Biden winning by above that average at the very end, and they were wrong. Donald Trump won North Carolina. He won it actually by more than 1%. It really wasn't that close. It was competitive, but Trump was the clear winner. And so looking at just how much the New York Times has overestimated Democrats in the past, you'll see just how significant these three new polls are that instead show Trump dominating from this left-leaning pollster. Before we continue, 83% of you guys are not subscribed, so please take the time to subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November, and join my Discord server to chat with me personally, link in the description below. And so now I'll show you guys what the 2024 electoral map would actually look like if Trump is able to pull off the margins that the New York Times currently predicts. So in terms of the solid blue states that Harris is going to win by 15 points or more, we only have California, Hawaii, Massachusetts, Maryland, the District of Columbia, as well as the 1st District of Maine. But for Trump, we have a much longer list: Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, all of Nebraska except the 2nd District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, South Carolina, the 2nd District of Maine, Alaska, and Iowa are all going to be solid red. Yes, Iowa can be a solid red state. Trump's going to win it by 10% at the very least. If he can win Georgia by 5 points, Arizona by 5 points, there's no way he's not going to win Iowa by 15 points or more. This was an Obama state back in 2012, but it's taken a huge shift to the right in the last decade. Moving on now to the likely states, which will be decided by 7 to 15 points. Kamala Harris has a pretty long list of these states. Many of them were just solid states for Biden back in 2020 that Kamala Harris isn't going to perform as well in this November. On the West Coast, we have both Washington and Oregon. Both will be downgraded to likely blue status. Colorado and New Mexico aren't even going to be likely anymore. But we do also have Illinois, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, and Delaware. This will give Kamala Harris 181 electoral votes. If you watched the recent debate, then you'll know that the bias from the moderators is yet another example of the media environment contributing to division and making it hard for people to think for themselves. That's why I use Ground News, a website and app that gathers news from 50,000 sources around the world, so you can stay fully informed and see through media manipulation. Check it out for yourself at ground.news/election time. We can see here that there are over 600 articles on a recent story asking who won the Harris-Trump presidential debate. If we look at the coverage details and bias distribution, we can see which news sources cover this story, along with a breakdown of the political leaning of the outlets reporting. 41% of them lean left, while 22% lean right. If we want to compare headlines, we can see an outlet on the left reporting Harris won the debate, and it wasn't even close, while this headline from an outlet that leans right calls out the biased moderators from ABC. With an intense election upon us, I highly recommend Ground News. Just go to ground.news/election time, click the link in the description, or scan the QR code. Using my link gets you 40% off the Vantage plan, the same plan I use for unlimited access to all their features. As for Trump, he's easily going to win the Buckeye state of Ohio. It used to be very competitive. That is no longer the case. Ohio is nearly a solid red state. I have Trump winning by just under 15 points. I think he's going to do a little bit better in Iowa. That pushes it over that solid state threshold. But a win in Ohio is a win, and its 17 electoral votes are going to go a long way in helping Trump get reelected. Down in Texas, this is a state that the former president carried by 9 points in 2016 and by nearly 6 in 2020. In 2024, he is going to win Texas by his largest margin ever. It's probably going to be a double-digit margin, 40 huge electoral votes going to Trump. And finally, in Florida, this is another state where Trump is probably going to perform better than he did in both of the last 2 elections. The Sunshine State used to be the most competitive in the entire country. I mean, in 2000, it was decided by 0.009%. And then in 2012, it was the only tilt state on the entire map. In 2016, it was once again decided by less than 2 points. But then in 2020, Donald Trump did better than he did in 2016 when everybody thought that Joe Biden was actually going to flip Florida. And so today, Trump is on track to win the Sunshine State by 7 to 10 points. There's no doubt he's going to do much better than he did even in 2020. We're now going to fill in the lean states, and I want to get just to the competitive races, the closest states in the country. I just want to focus on those, so we're going to get through these lean states relatively fast. Colorado and New Mexico, Kamala Harris can win between 2 to 7 points. We also have New Hampshire. The Granite State is going to be one of the most competitive in the country, but as of right now, Kamala Harris is still the slight favorite. Same thing like we're seeing in Maine. The second district of Nebraska is actually going to be tilt red, so it's going to be a little bit more competitive, but I can see Trump coming out with a narrow victory. And then in Minnesota, the only reason why Kamala Harris is winning here is because she chose Governor Tim Walz to be her running mate. Without Walz, Kamala Harris would probably lose in Minnesota, but with the popular governor on the ticket with her, I have her winning by just over 2 points, which would still be a huge drop off from where the state was in 2020 when Joe Biden won Minnesota by 7 points without having its literal governor as his running mate. And so now we're left with the 8 swing states. I am including Virginia as it's become significantly more competitive than it was in 2020. Republicans won the governorship here in 2021, and Virginia only continues to shift to the right. However, as of this point, Democrats are still the slight favorites. I'm also going to fill in Nevada, where Trump has a slight lead. Nevada is not going to be able to decide the election. It doesn't have enough electoral votes. And so with Trump at 226, Harris at 225, it really is going to be these 6 states that will matter the most. Yes, Nevada is competitive, but there's really no realistic scenario where a candidate must win the silver state to realistically get to 270 electoral votes. So with these remaining states, we're first going to fill in the 3 in the Sun Belt based on these New York Times margins. Arizona is going to go to Harris by 5 points. It's going to be a lean red state, as the likely threshold is, of course, 7 points. In Georgia, she leads by 4%. The Peach State will also be lean red. And then in North Carolina, the Tar Heel State will barely be lean in favor of Donald Trump, as he does hold the prerequisite 2-point lead. And so we're left with the 3 Rust Belt states. Donald Trump will not be able to win the election without one of these states: Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. The good thing for the former president, though, is that he was able to win all 3 of them in 2016. This time around, he only needs to win one of them. And considering just how much better Trump is doing in the polling here than he was in 2020, I think it's pretty much a guarantee he is going to win at least one of them. Basically, all across the board, whether it's Roker Politics, The Hill, or 538, the polling averages in the Midwest show a dead heat between Trump and Harris. In Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, we essentially have a virtual tie. You can look at any polling aggregator, that is what you will find. And that is great news for Donald Trump, because just look at what happened in 2020. We're going to start off on the left with Wisconsin. The polling said Joe Biden was going to win by 8.4%. He won the state by 0.63. That was less than Trump's margin from 2016. Today, polls in Wisconsin show Harris up maybe by 1% at most, according to the average. Sometimes it's even a tie. So Wisconsin is incredibly close, according to the polling, despite Joe Biden winning it by 8 points in the last election. Next up, in neighboring Michigan, Joe Biden was supposed to win the Wolverine state by 8 percentage points. In the end, he won it by 2.8. Yes, he did win it by a larger margin than Wisconsin, but the polls still overestimated Democrats by over 5 percentage points. And then in Pennsylvania, Biden was supposed to win by 4.7. He won the state by 1.2. This was probably the most accurate one, but the Keystone State polling still did underestimate Republican support by 3.5 percentage points. And so if the polls today now show a dead heat between the 2 candidates in all 3 of these states, I think there's no doubt that Trump is going to come out on top, probably by a lean margin in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, and then a tilt margin in Michigan. And a big surprise that has happened over the last few weeks is that Arizona has now become the most conservative swing state out of the 7 or 8, if you want to include Virginia. According to Polymarket's odds, Trump has a 63% chance at winning Arizona. That is higher than his chances of winning Georgia, which sit at 61, and North Carolina, which sit at 56. Before this election cycle, nobody really thought that Arizona was going to be the most conservative swing state. It was probably going to be North Carolina or Georgia, but this is a very interesting trend, as an uptick for Trump in Arizona could signal a significant improvement in Nevada as well. And if Trump can dominate in the Sun Belt, there's basically no chance that Kamala Harris will get to the presidency, as it's very unlikely she's going to hold on to all 3 of these former blue wall states. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like down below, comment down below who you think is going to win the 2024 election, and subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November.